So welcome to Mike's Podcast Club. We are a community of podcasters that basically exists to help each other make brilliant podcasts. And today at our monthly virtual meetup, it's all about how to win a podcast award. And as well as it being a lovely, clever title to reel you all in, we've got some lovely special guests to talk to you about exactly that. So the first half of Mike's Podcast Club February is we've got Matt Deegan, the co-founder of the British Podcast Awards, talking about his top tips straight from the horse's mouth to win a British Podcast Award. And then the second half, we've got some of our award-winning community members from Mike's Podcast Club to chat to you about their winning tactics and if having their awardness has made a difference to their podcast or to them. Or to their life in general. I've got to mention though, Frankie from Doing It for the Kids, she's had to sadly pull out of tonight, but she sent her co-presenter Steve to kindly step in at the last minute. So there'll be time to ask Matt and our Mike Community Award winners questions at the end of their little bit. And to do that, you do it in the chat. So there is a chat function on Zoom, I'm sure everybody knows by now. And to ask a question, if you before your question, put hashtag Q or hashtag question, then Charles, my glamorous assistant for tonight, he's my Debbie McGee of tonight. He's going to then, by some sort of magic, put them into a document and I can see them. So yeah, if you've got a question for anyone, hashtag question, we'll see it in the chat and we'll pop it somewhere ready for it to be asked at a future date or time or today. Also, there's like loads of cool stuff that happens in that chat. People, again, tea conversations or little hacks and stuff. So yeah, feel free to chat away in there. What else do I need to tell you? Finally, we are recording tonight. So it's the first one we've ever recorded, and the first one we're going to have is a watch again or a listen again. And so if you'd rather not your face or your voice be on that video, then and then do what you need to do to cover it, or don't ask a question. So that's how I just want to preface that in case you're wondering why we're recording it. So hi. So first up, in the first hour from just about now till 7 o'clock, we've got Matt Deegan, who has a massive, huge background in radio and lots of fingers in lots of different radio and podcast pies. But the reason why he's here tonight is because he's the co-founder of the British Podcast Awards, which also runs an awards in Australia. And the British Podcast Awards this year is in its 6th year. And he's here tonight to give his expert view on what it takes to make or create an award-winning entry. And just an FYI, I saw Matt a couple of years ago talk at Pods Up North, which is a podcaster conference in the north of England, and I went back and followed every step that Matt had advised, and I got nominated for a British Podcast Award. So I'm not saying that it was down to Matt, but I think it helped. And on that note, welcome Matt Deegan to Mike's Podcast Club.
Hello, really nice to be here. Right, let's kick off. Let's get into it. Let me share this. So I always think, I do this. I've done this a few times for people, and hopefully it'll help you in putting your entry together for the British Podcast Awards or any other awards that you might happen to enter. But also, even if you're not planning to enter the awards, I think actually there's quite a lot of good tips in here just for improving your own shows and thinking about how you do your own podcasts. So we'll kick off by just kind of talking a bit about where the awards came from. The awards started by me and a colleague, Matt Hill. Like all good meetings, it started in the pub. I think we'd done a sort of audio recording. And this was about 6 years ago. And for some reason, we got onto awards and there wasn't a podcast awards. And we were saying, oh, at some point there will be some awards. And I bet some idiots run it and will really hate them and they won't care about the sector. And that'll really annoy us. And then after a few more beers, that turned into, hey, well, maybe we should put on an awards. And in that first year, the view was, hey, if I have to stand on a chair in an all bar one and read out the winners, then, so be it. But actually, it was bigger than that. Everyone was really excited for it to be in awards. The podcast sector in all around the world, but also in the UK, it's really broad. There's loads of different types of creators, from people that create shows just in their kitchens right through to big international broadcasters. And actually, everyone's got different objectives. Some it's just having fun, some it's making money, some it's for their charity or their business. And there isn't lots that bring all of podcasters together. And what we hope with the awards is that we're kind of a very, very big tent, and that everybody everyone can be involved, they feel comfortable entering, and have lots of fun. The other thing that we do is we work really hard on the judging panel. So there's over 150 judges of the awards, really diverse panel, gender, location, backgrounds, ages. And what's great about having such a diverse panel is it means we have loads of really interesting nominees. So I think sometimes people think, oh, it's a club. How can my little show ever win? Generally judging your category will be a real mix of people from lots of different backgrounds. So it's not like it's all sewn up, or that, hey, this amount of people think like this amount of awards will go to this company, or like none of that happens. The judging, there are so many judges. If I wanted to fix it, it would be too complicated. I would have to butter up so many people and get them all on the same page without anybody giving it away. It sort of couldn't be done. And I don't know if you might have judged awards in your sector before, but what's quite nice is when we bring together our final round judges, they sort of listen to everything themselves privately, and then they meet up and have a big discussion. And the response we get from those meetings is really interesting. And people sort of say, I got really passionate about defending this podcast that I never heard before I'd started listening to it 2 days ago. And our judge is very passionate and excited to hear great audio. And that's kind of why we do it. We do the awards to help people find great shows and to build their audiences. Now, the awards just gone that we had in July. So we had the last year's in July. We did in a sort of festival vibe, partly because of COVID restrictions, but also because we thought it would be quite fun. And just so you know, here's what happened.
Welcome to the British Podcast Awards 2021! We have some very big awards to give out by some very big guests.
Good afternoon, everyone!
My God, there's real people.
How good is this? We're in a tent drinking cider. I'm so excited to see a Portaloo.
We're very excited to read you the nominations for this award, but before we do that, we'd like to talk to you about Squarespace.
Now the nominations for Best Family Podcast, Best Fiction Podcast,
True Crime Podcast,
Best Branded Podcast,
Best Sex and Relationships Podcast,
And the winner is...
Gardening with the RHS,
Vent Documentary,
Hey!
Stars in Your Ears, Grounded by Louis Theroux, The Real Dictators.
Big props to Sam, obviously to the boys who aren't here, and
they're not dead.
They're not dead, yeah.
Oh my God!
To everyone at the British Podcast Awards, we're all thanking you.
Thank you so much. Awards are bullshit till you win one. Thank you.
It was nice to see them get recognition in a platform and a space that they wouldn't usually get it.
And to be able to tell those stories and to have those stories recognised, and for it to be recognised not just by those people but by your peers, I mean, that's an incredible feeling.
You're the best. Love you.
Thank you again for watching. If you've enjoyed this afternoon, we've been Jordan North, William Hanson and Poppy Jane.
Yeah, we had lots and lots of fun last year. And what's always nice about the nominees and the winners is it's a really broad mix. So yes, there are some bigger stars or people with large production resources, but there's also one-man bands and people who just make shows at home or for their companies or charities. So anybody has a chance of winning, and that's a really important message just to get out there. So 10 top tips to win a British Podcast Award. Number one, as they said at school, always read the instructions first, read the rules. Check the rules are on our website, britishpodcastawards.com, or they will be when we open for entries on March the 1st this year. At the moment, you can go on the website and see last year's rules, which will be broadly the same. So check the rules. Key things to think about. We're looking for audio. You publish to your RSS feeds between February the 1st and February 28th, not the 31st, because it doesn't exist. You can tell I quickly edited this from last year. February 1st, 2021 to February 28th, 2022. That's the audio. We're looking for audio from that point. We're after 5 clips. That's all you submit. You don't submit an episode. You submit your 5 best clips. And they've got to be from at least 3 episodes. So you can't have had like one amazing show, put all stuff from there. We want to know that just like all great podcasts that are regular, that produce lots of episodes, we want to have 5 clips from at least 3 episodes. Also, you need to have released at least 6 episodes. So the reason we have this rule is, there's lots of people who have a first episode of a podcast, and they might have a second episode of a podcast, then they might give up or change their minds or whatever. We're here to recognize great shows, and they're ones that have got to existed for a little bit, and we say 6 episodes. There's some slight different rules if you have a specific series for a specific reason, particularly kind of in documentaries and drama, where we're a little bit more flexible, but generally you've got to publish at least 6 episodes. And then your 5 clips will generally, most categories, be up to a maximum of 15 minutes long. We're not looking for hundreds of hours to listen to. We have nearly 2,000 entries to the awards. Everything's listened to at least twice, up to 6 times. So if you can imagine how many hours that is to consume all this audio, that's why we have the 15-minute limit. Follow these rules. People get in touch and say, oh, but I've got a really great 6th clip. I really want to put it in. Or can I put 18 minutes? No, just read the rules. It's complicated enough to run an award ceremony without you trying to get around it or have a great reason. My inbox is really large, and the answer will always be no, just follow the rules. And part of the reason the answer is no is because if I change it for you, and what happens to everybody else? Well, they could have had a 7th clip or a 6th clip or whatever. So yeah, read the rules, follow the rules. If you think there's something wrong with the rules or we've messed something up, of course, send us an email and we'll be very responsive. But like generally, don't try and get around them, just follow them. So number 1, check that. Then number 2, really important. I think it's important for your show generally, or if you're entering an award, listen to your audio. Now, you might have listened to it when you edited it and put it out. Go back and listen to your shows. Make notes on all the good bits and maybe the bad bits too. That can be handy for improving your program. Make notes of the good bits. Also, yeah, use it. Use it as a useful thing and recognize what you should have done. Often you get much better. You might be listening back to stuff from a year ago and you realize that you've changed things and fixed things. So use it as a learning exercise, but also go through your podcast to find good material and good clips. Create a short list of material that you could use. Also, and I see quite a lot of people do this, is they obviously ask their listeners, is there anything you remember or things you thought were really good as well? Having a different point of view, I think is really great. But go back and listen, and if you've got a team who work on your show or there's you and a co-host, all go back and listen, write down all your good bits. Do this early. Don't do this the night before because you suddenly realize you've got loads of material and that you should have started this a week ago. I'm going to enthuse you for the next half an hour about this. So now's a great opportunity to go back in your podcast app, listen back to all your shows, start making notes of the good stuff. Also fix things. The awards open on March the 1st. As I said, we're looking for audio until the 28th of Feb. You have 19 days to fix your show. If there's something you want to change and you still want to enter that audio into the awards, you can, if you publish it within the next 19 days. Maybe you want to do the perfect opener. Maybe you know your microphone technique's been a bit shit so far. Maybe you want to change your graphics for your podcast, or get that super great guest. Well, you've got 19 days to do any of those things if you want to add to your show. Now, key thing with all awards and with ours, and it's maybe it's not fair, but the best podcasts don't win awards. The best entries win awards. We don't know what you haven't included. You might have had a bad day putting together your entries, and your podcast is the best podcast in the world ever. Tough. Best podcasts don't win awards. Best entries do. Got to put together a great entry. That's your aim. So what is a great entry? Remember, these people who are listening, they're listening to a load of stuff, probably at the same time. Just like when you make things and you have deadlines, they're probably listening on that Sunday before they're supposed to tell me all their shortlist. So you got to really cut through. Clarity. If someone listens to this afresh, do they understand what your show is and what you're trying to do? Use your entry to demonstrate a variety of skills. Don't have the same clips doing the same thing all along. You're trying to be the best, you're trying to demonstrate you're the best podcast in a certain category, demonstrate a variety of skills. Audio is primary. Audio is the most important thing. And most of our judges will rack up all the audio and listen to audio all the way. There is also space to enter some text information, usually about 250 words about your show and another 250 words for a track listing. And there's a bit of space for some kind of marketing material as well. Different people look at judge in different ways. What lots do is when they're listening to the audio is flick through the docs that they've been sent. Like they're in awards mode and they'll flick through. Or they listen to everything because they're on the bus or on the tube or doing something like that in the car. They make a note of the ones they've sort of shortlisted in their head, and then they'll go and read the information. So audio, it's got to kind of hold together really in the audio. Someone's going to be able to listen to that and they've got to think, hey, I've got it. I understand what this show is. Starting with in jokes, off mic people, new. You're entering the British Podcast Awards. You are trying to beat other people. No crap bits. Really simple. Don't put any crap in there. Anything, when people judge it, and in either of, we sort of have two judging rounds. Often you go, hey, I really like this bunch of shows, but I'm only allowed to put 6 through, or I've got to argue about this many. You are looking for reasons to bump people off. Now, it might have been a great interview, but if that guest's off mic, you better make sure it's a fucking amazing interview to make up for there being a problem in it. This is a competitive environment. You are competing with other people for it. So work hard, really do pick your best bits. As I said, supporting docs are important. Track listing and about. So my sort of secret tip number 1 is in the about section, 250 words, not a lot of words to try and get over all the amazing stuff that you've done and reasons why you should win. Track listing, we're just after some phrases that explain each of the clips. Now, some people will just go like, from 0 to minute 2, Jeff talks about cheese. From minute 2 to minute 6, Jeff interviews Cheese Man. Actually, there's more space in there. You could maybe say who that person was and why they're on the show. You could squeeze a bit more knowledge and information in there, and that could be quite useful. What should you write in 250 words? I always think you're trying to sell the success of your show. Now, everyone's success is different. Success can be, I've never did a podcast before, and over the last year, I've got really good and we've improved and our listening has gone from 0 to 200 listeners. That's fine. Someone else might go, hey, we were in series 5, we had 50,000 listeners, now we've got 70,000 listeners. Someone might go, you know what, our focus has been Patreon and we've added 50 Patreon subscribers over this time. Sell your story and sell what you've achieved. I think that's a really powerful thing to put in the about section. There is a space for a PDF of kind of comments and press, not essential to put in. I'm sure not every judge looks through it, but if you've got some stuff, I think a single page whacked together, screen grabs from iTunes reviews, Apple Podcast reviews, maybe you got some local press, maybe there's some good social, just something that rounds out your show. You're like looking for like drip, drip, drip encouragement for judges to go, hey, this is really good. I like the audio, and oh God, they did this, had this great idea, and then they executed. Oh, cool, there was some press as well. So nothing's essential, but all these things are sort of drip, 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 and they all help. Next thing, audio entry. Start strong. You know, you might be in 15 entries that someone's listening to on a Sunday afternoon, and if it's a category, you know, entertainment or it's politics or it's whatever, you know, they listen to a lot of shows that are quite similar because people have entered the same category. You've got to stand out. Start strong, best foot forward, get the judge's attention. Now, your 5 clips on your entry, you do not have to start with your opener. That is not essential. You could start with an amazing bit of audio from an interview you did, or some brilliant execution of a feature or whatever. You want to catch their attention. You might put the setup second, actually. So you might have a really amazing interview, and then it's the opener as clip 2 with like, hey, I'm Matt. My show's all about this, and this is, you know, this is what we do. So if you think about the ordering, it doesn't have to be, you know, the sort of traditional narrative. We start with this and we end with this. You don't need to put your opener on there for things self-explanatory, or you do it in a question or presenter chat or whatever. That's all fine. You can try and maximize those clips though. Some people say, oh, I really want to put my theme music. Should that be a clip? No, we don't care. No one cares about your theme music. Now, bit of your theme music into opener and you think that's really strong. Cool, put it in. But we don't need audio production. We don't need jingles in between clips. These are bright people listening to your material. It should be self-contained. We don't allow in-clip editing. This is like just solid bits you've kind of plucked out and dropped into the entry. But yeah, start strong, best foot forward. And to give you an example, I thought I would come up with and show you some of our winners and how they started their entries. And these are kind of 4 kind of quite different shows, some big ones and some little ones. And here's how they started. Don't worry if you think, oh shit, my show isn't anything like this. Oh God, it's different. Everyone's different. And that's good. It's interesting if you're judging to hear all these different kinds of shows. But what I quite like about these clips is they all start in different ways, but I think they do grab your attention. First up, he was a big winner a couple of years ago, George the Poet. You might have heard his podcast, but here's how he starts his entry.
Obviously, they're active.
Hey, these are more Fireboys. You've seen them more Fireboys.
All right, now to all my listeners who don't like this music, please don't forward this bit. It's lit. Trust me, this bit is lit. You go ahead, hey, come this way. Song's called Oi. It's by 3 good brethrens, ended up becoming a couple of teen hood legends. Oh God. So if you're not familiar with this song, let me be a tour guide for you, if that's all right with you. I'll show you what it means to us. That's all I can do. I mean, come on, man. We'll talk about more Fire Crew.
Oi, who's that bully for me? Oi, who's that bully for me? Oi, who's that bully for me? The one around back and just don't give it to me like, oh, there's that bully for me. Oh, there's that bully for me. Oh, there's that bully for me.
Yeah, this music's straight from the gutters of London. No government funding, no big machines, no business teams, just kids with dreams and the ability to turn nothing to something. More Fire Crew was a group from East London. Growing up, I heard their tunes at street functions, and even though we knew nothing about East London, we loved them.
Now, George the Poet is a poet. He has, you know, it rhymes. It's musical. You don't always get a lot of that on podcast. It's different. It stands out. Absolutely stands out. But another podcast did well last year, Vent Documentaries, actually covered some similar things that George had done in the previous years. Their opener, very different.
You know my bro. Me sir.
I literally gobbled all of that fast.
It's a Sunday, alive.
Yeah.
It's a Sunday, alive.
Sunday.
Literally, man just came from my yard as well. Had a good rice and peas. Tell her that man had mutton as well. You know?
Sit down. Yeah. Grab that skeet meat. Or grab the trouble one.
Bro?
What the fuck is that?
It's a freaking recorder, man. I was doing a documentary for Vice and Brent, man. What? Yeah, my bro. I got one little podcast coming down. Vice and Brent 2020, London Borough of Culture. This is Vent Documentaries. Young people from one London borough telling you the stories we care about. This is Series 3, where we are talking about justice. What's good? My name's Kez. I'm an artist and creative director. I'm interested in documenting and archiving the experiences of young people from minority backgrounds in the UK.
Now, interesting about that, all off mic, bit strange to start. You lean in, you think, what the hell is this? Then it kicks in, it's music into an explainer. I think a really great way to grab people's attention. Again, different end of the spectrum. One of our comedy winners a few years ago was Joan and Jericha. You might have heard their podcast, very funny podcast, very rude podcast, sort of semi-improvised. And here's how they started their entry.
Well, a very good morning to you.
Good morning
as
to you.
always, Jericha.
Yes, and to you, Joan, and to everybody listening. Good morning.
And I love what you've done with the eyebrows.
Thank you. Yes.
Is that tattooed or is that woven? Or
it's a mixture, actually. What had happened was I'd had some eyebrow corrosion. It's very common, lady of my age. Nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of talking about it now. What happens is that half the eyebrow will fall away quite quickly.
Is that due to the wind?
It can be wind, it can be diet, although as we know, I eat very well.
So bizarre, strange, again, interesting, intriguing. It's two people, not the world's best quality mics in the world, but, they're funny, it's engaging, and it's different. I bet no other award entry started in a similar way, talking about eyebrows that fall off due to the wind. And finally, one of our winners from last year, this is a podcast called Dead Honest, which interviewed people in the death industry.
What we might find unsettling is being around so many people who are dead.
Yeah.
How do you find it?
I don't find it unsettling at all. It's very quiet. The living are really unpredictable and really quite noisy. Even just in something like breathing, you can hear them. You don't have anything to worry about from the deceased. They are just still. So it is quite a calm and peaceful environment.
What I love about that is it made me reconsider whether dead people are better than living people. But again, draws you in, different type of voice, saying a strange thing that you don't maybe think about day to day, and compelling audio. So think about your beginnings. What have you got that sells your show or catches people's attention? Also, and then connected to this is you think about the competition. You are playing against other people. You're trying to put your best foot forward, trying to show your work, but you're competing against other people in the space. What do you do that's different? What do you do that stands out? What makes you stand out from similar shows, particularly in all these individual categories where it's thematic and there are kind of similar things? What makes you stand out? The best entertainment winner this year was a show with lots of impressions, and it had a band, and it was just very, very different to other people in that category. And I think everyone's got their angle. You've got to lean into your angle in your entry and find the right category for it. Thinking about different categories, some people look at the category list and think, oh, I sort of fit in a couple of those, or I want to enter a couple of those. That's perfectly all right. You're able to enter up to 3 categories for each of your podcasts. You don't have to. Some people just enter 1, but some people go, oh no, we're a true crime news podcast. You want to be in both those categories. That's absolutely fine. But remember to tune the entry to that category, because again, you're playing against other people who, if someone, say you're entering both true crime and news, some people might just be entering true crime or just be entering news. So if you're making an entry that sort of fits both those categories, that might be weaker than tuning an entry, submitting a different entry for news and a different entry for true crime. The way the system works, it's a really easy to use kind of award system where you upload your entries. You can clone entries. So you might actually write a lot of material or get the graphics up or get all the information up and clone it and then just swap out the audio for the different categories that you enter. Similarly, there's a best new podcast category that a lot of new shows obviously enter alongside a regular category. Again, like think about, that's slightly different. That's a bit broader, really, a best new versus kind of something that's very specific and you're trying to demonstrate, I'm the greatest true crime podcast. So think about the categories, have a look at who was nominated last year, who won, particularly if you're not really sure what category to be in. Generally, we're quite broad and we don't really disqualify people if they don't fit or they don't seem like they fit. Sometimes the judges might go, I didn't really think this fitted the category. And obviously that will drift towards the bottom of the list. But if you think, no, there's something special about me and true crime, and it's a bit different, if you think it should be in there, that's fine. And the judges listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's a really interesting take on true crime. So read the categories, look at previous entries in the categories, and tune it. That's very important. Number 9, play your entry to your mum or an equivalent mum-like person. Doesn't have to be a mother. I say mum because I often think about my mum, and my mum seemingly never finds anything good in anything I've ever done in all my life. She says very nice things, but then she points out all the problems with anything at any point. You might have someone in your life like that. And I think sometimes in podcasting, you're very close to the material. Whereas if you play it to someone who doesn't listen or hasn't really listened, they will give you a very honest reaction about whether they understand it. What are you trying to do? I don't get these jokes, or you didn't say what you're about, or I didn't know who this interviewer was. So finding someone to listen to it and go, does that make sense? Did you enjoy it? What did you think? Try and kind of get that feedback. And I think that can be really, really powerful. And just go outside of the regular group, outside of listeners, get an external viewpoint. And part of that is sort of connected to my final tip, which is don't leave it until the last minute. Now, it's really easy to say, and everyone sort of says, oh no, of course I won't leave it to the last minute. We get more than 60% of our entries submitted on the last day. So everybody panics and does it at the last minute. Now, why you shouldn't do that is, number one, you suddenly realize there's a section of the entry form that will require some time and you have now run out of it. Suddenly your internet goes down. Suddenly you have a work or family crisis. Try and do it as early as possible, particularly on the listening back and putting your entry together, but also putting it in the form and submitting in the form. You can also be incredibly smug that a few days before, hey, I've already got my awards entry in. Also, sometimes when you submit it, you're then thinking about it. You could do all the work, you think about it. And then you think, oh, I should have put that in, or I should have said that. You can edit your entries, even the ones that have been submitted, right up to the last moment on our system. So the more time that you've kind of got on the clock, actually you can go back in and tweak something or change it. Also, you can check it and not panic about it. We have more mistakes on entries later on, particularly if they're having some trouble and it's kind of right up to that last minute and things aren't included, or they've uploaded clips wrong, or they haven't read the instructions properly. So please leave time to listen to your stuff, to think about what you're going to submit. Try and submit it early, and that gives you a little bonus bit of time to think about what to do. But yeah. And I say this and everyone nods and no one does it and they all panic and they'll do it on the last day, but try and build some time into this process. So overall, check your work, listen back to it. So check the entries, check the rules and requirements, listen back to your work. You've still got time to fix your podcast if you want to add some stuff in that can be included in your awards entries. Remember, best podcasts don't win, best entries win. Think about the documentation that goes alongside your award. I've obviously moved something off there. Competition, think about the competition, think about the right categories, check it with a mum-like person. Don't leave it to the last minute on the deadline. On our timings, entry is going to open on the 1st of March, a little bit later than they normally do, but not that far away. We close about 5-6 weeks later on the 11th of April. That is a hard deadline. There aren't extensions. And just a bit of background to that. It's not because we're mean, it's because as soon as the entries close, we are into first round judging. And literally hours after, we are sending hundreds and hundreds of entries to people, and then having to deal with last minute ones messes up our systems and means that we could fuck up your entries and what's going where. So please try and get it in before deadline. Nominations we'll reveal at the end of May or June, and then we'll have a ceremony this year. It's going to be on the 23rd of July in London. It's going to be similar to last year, and we're going to do it as an outdoor kind of festival style event. If you do have any questions that you don't think about now, please get in touch. You can do that through the website, info@britishpodcastawards.com, or tweet us, Britpod Awards, and there's more info obviously on our website, britishpodcastawards.com. There you go. That's my top 10 tips to win a British Podcast Award.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. Really, really helpful. And it's great to see it again laid out in the top 10 tips. I have to say, I was one of those first round judges last year, and I was quite, you will come across arseholes like me judging that if your entry was too long, I immediately dismissed it because you've not read the rules. So
God, harsh. That's it. You win an award and suddenly you just turn really mean.
I know, isn't it? It's gone to my head.
What did you feel like listening to loads of entries? How did you feel about actually entering, having listened to a load of stuff that people put forward?
Absolutely bloody shocked that I got nominated, because I understood the process, and I was like, bloody hell. So this is an answer to the question that a lot of people ask is, I'm a small independent podcaster. You guys, I'm never going to get noticed because you only look at the BBC stuff. No. It's like, I'm a little podcast producer. Well, a little podcast producer from Manchester that made a little podcast called Strong Manchester Women that got nominated for a British Podcast Award. So I can say that that's definitely a myth that needs busting there. Yeah. And
that's why that's, as I said before, our judging is really broad, and we'll have the control of Radio 4 is in our judging, but newer people or people who've won previously are in there too. And that mix, we think is kind of really powerful. And it's also particularly for marginalized voices who think, I'm not sure they'll get me. Well, actually, we work quite hard to make sure that the judging is really diverse. And so actually they do get you if you do something a bit different.
Yeah, and I think that would be music to a lot of our communities, that you've got a representative judging panel, because that's sometimes where that discourse happens. We've got some questions. Actually, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
How many entries did you get last year?
We had 1,800 entries last year. Different categories get different amounts of entries. Our biggest category is always best new podcast, because a lot of people can fit in that category in that year. Also, people are really excited in the first year about their podcast, so of course they want to enter and push something in. But then some of the niche categories are smaller. Best podcast in the Welsh language, that's the one to enter, smallest number of entries, but a real kind of mixed bag along the rest.
What's your other, Steve asked this question actually, what's your other category that's the least applications? I think his plan is to create a podcast that gets the least amount of...
You've just got to learn Welsh, that's it, you've just got to learn
There you
Welsh.
go, Steve, that's your next
Small
podcast.
thing. Yeah.
We've got a few more questions coming in. So Radio Lento was one of our community members here at Mike's Podcast Club, and they don't think that they fit into a category. So their question is, should they shoehorn themselves into something that they think that they should fit into? So basically, actually, let's get Radio Lento on mic.
Unmute yourself and tell me about your show.
We record under trees and next to beaches, and there's no music, there's no talking. It's just an hour, 30 minutes or so of the sound from that place. That
is quite the show. We actually had a similar show was nominated last year. I'm trying to remember which category it entered. I will look it up. Whether it was it might have been in Best New, which you might not qualify for now. I always think if you really don't think you fit in, I'm just going to run through the categories in my mind. I often say Best Smartest Podcast is a great category to enter. I would probably put yours in arts. So there's an arts category, and you're sort of, you're creating an artwork, and I think that would fit into the arts category. Again, I think those judges, they're seeing stuff around, obviously around arts and books and theatre and cinema, and so I think it becomes audio artwork. So I think it fits the arts category.
No, I wonder whether there was also the wellness category, but I imagine that would be pretty flooded with so many other things in there.
Yeah, wellness is interesting. So wellness gets a lot of mental health stuff now. There's a lot of mental health podcasts over the last couple of years, but also fitness podcasts go in there. I think wellness, again, it's quite broad. I would say if you're entering something like that, use the docs to explain why it fits that category. So a lot of our listeners feel that it relaxes them, or we get feedback about blah, blah, blah. Put the context around it, and then people will listen to it and go, oh, really interesting, I really like the audio. Does it fit this category? Read the info. So, oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I hadn't thought about that. So, yeah, I think you, again, use the documentation to direct our judges to.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Another one on the entry process from Steve Headington, coming live from Wales. He said even if he doesn't think they stand an absolute chance of winning, is it worth popping an entry in?
Well, I'd always say you've got to be in it to win it. So, if you're going to do something, you've got to put it in. Now, there is, our nominees and our winners are really good podcasts. We're not putting anybody in because, we really should put them in because they were very hardworking, even though it sounds dreadful. Everyone is pitched against each other. It's about great sounding shows, really interesting shows, so that challenges people, entertains people. We're after really great stuff. So, it's finding great stuff in your podcast that hangs together as an entry. I think that's important. Everyone should have that. If you're making regular material, they hopefully should be gold within amongst the stuff that you do. And if there isn't anything that's really good, maybe you should think about what's in your show. That's the other thing. Now we have categories. We have a category. We have an option when you have an entry to tick Best Bullseye Award, and that's for smaller shows. So we take all the entries for all the different categories, and it's for shows with less than 5,000 listeners, so kind of the smaller shows, and that gets judged again separately. So again, if you're doing something very interesting at a small level and you're worried about competing at the big level, you also have a kind of another little party that you're playing in. So there is that. But I think, you got to be in it to win it. Try and find the material to support it being a best podcast. If it's you and your mate chatting aimlessly and it's unlistenable and you have 12 listeners, then it's probably not the best podcast in the country, and it's probably not going to win. If the two of you talk about really interesting things that no one else does in a really fascinating way, and doesn't matter that you're not famous and you might only have 12 listeners because you never had the audience, but it's really great, absolutely fine. Then you totally have a chance of winning. I think the podcast I played of the person looking into the sort of death industry and people that work with dead people, like sub 500 listens an episode. So like it's not, you don't have to be George the Poet or My Dad Wrote a Porno to win.
That was the thing when I was nominated. I didn't have that many. I didn't have the 100K listeners?
We ask for how many listeners you have. It's optional to fill in. It's quite good for context. Some people don't fill it in. We don't, obviously, we take it at face value and assume podcasters are honest people and put the numbers in there. No one really judges based on, hey, wow, I had 100,000 listeners. In some ways, I think when it's larger, they're a bit tougher on podcasts than maybe there are for other ones. So don't worry about numbers. It's about the material.
I'd have to say that Steve's podcast will be quite unique in the fact that you probably don't have many alpaca podcasts that are nominated or put into the British Podcast Awards.
If it's the best alpaca podcast, great.
We've got a few more questions for you. Just in terms of your application, if you put in there that you've won other awards or been nominated for other awards, are you going to think like, oh, well, they don't need us? Or
no, I mean, I think it's context as well, particularly if you want something in your sector or in your kind of strata of podcasts or whatever. It's interesting, isn't it? Judges, no one tests the judges and queries why they thought what about shows. So, you might list all those off and then they might think, well, I still thought it was rubbish. Or they might go, oh, I thought it was amazing. It was deserved to win all those awards. So, individuals are reading these things. So you use it I think using it to provide context is absolutely fine.
And then another quite technical question actually about the entries. So you've got 5 clips.
Yeah.
I've looked in my hand, 5 clips. So each clip together, that's got to be 15 minutes, or is it 15 minutes per clip?
No, 15 minutes in total.
Right, that's not much, is it?
It's not much at all. Though when it's a Duff podcast, within a couple of minutes, as we all know when we listen to shows and we hit play on, our app of choice, you can tell pretty quickly whether something's good or not. I think the trick is it's good and then it draws your attention and you listen more and more and you're really excited about listening. And that's the option within a 15-minute entry. The other thing is it's one single MP3, which we underlined about 6 times and mentioned a number of times. People still upload 5 separate MP3s. It's one MP3. Just think if someone is just listening, we're trying to make it easy for them to listen. So download. They will download a single MP3.
Strict guidelines as well for gap in between stuff and how it flows. And
so again, most of our rules are just trying to harmonize everything. So no in-clip editing. So if you had an average 7-minute segment and you've just sub-edited it to make it an amazing 2-minute segment, not acceptable. So we're looking for like whole clips. Very occasionally a judge has said to us, I think there was some in-clip editing. Now, of course, you might have had some in-clip editing when you were making the show. But one of the things with podcasts is we can go and have a listen. Like if they go, hey, it was episode 7, this bit. I mean, it has been known that people have gone back and just had a little double check to see if someone was trying to sort of skirt around the rules. So no in-clip editing, with like a gap in between each clip, just to know it's a clip. And you could have, so you might have a 7-minute element and only want like minute 2 to 4 and then minute 5 to 7. That's fine, but it becomes 2 clips because we know there's a gap.
Oh, insider tips, I love it. Now James is asking, what category should she put her climate change podcast in?
Well, there's an interesting question to ask. So we are adding a new category this year called the Climate Award that we haven't talked about yet. And the Climate Award is exclusive. And that will be for podcasts about climate and sort of the environment. I mean, mainly climate driven, but, about, world wellness. Also for shows that have done particular episodes on this topic. So that can be entered. Or a show that has maybe gone carbon neutral or has done something interesting in the environmental space. So it's a little bit different to the other categories. Entry requirements will be similar, but we're trying to broaden out from just like, it's not best climate podcast, but a great climate podcast might win that category. So the Climate Award is going to be added this year.
Wow, you got any more new categories?
There is also a Rising Star Award, it's kind of a people award, which we haven't really done in the past. So someone who's kind of newish to podcasting, so the last couple of years, or newish to audio, who has sort of demonstrated decent achievement or growth in the couple of years they've been in the industry, or made an impact. There's not best haircut in a podcast, seen in the chat there. One day there will be a Smash Hits Poll Winners Party like podcast awards, and then we can have best haircut.
I think Ant McGillen's been trolling you in the chat all throughout this, Matt, so you can thank him later. And just one more question I think we've got time for in here is I'm going to ask about the impact. So do you know about any, so the Dead People podcast?
Yes.
Little tiny podcast, well, a little podcast, a great listener following.
Yep.
What impact has any the British Podcast Awards had on any winners, especially that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we kind of informally ask people about how things have gone, and generally it's positive. We have a look at chart positions, so pretty much all our winners jump up the charts, and so something like that show wasn't in the even kind of category charts, it just wasn't of the scale. It jumped into the top 200 and then hit its category for a while. One of the great things about charts is people see things in charts and they kind of tune in more and grow from there. The shows that do well are ones that use the awards as an excuse to do their own marketing as well, or to echo our marketing, and we do social videos for our winners and things like that. So success is mixed depending on just topic, what captures people's imaginations when they hear about it. A lot of people obviously go to our website to look at all the winners or look at nominees and click through and listen, and we can see that data. Some shows become transformed. George the Poet, when he won, was not a big show in the slightest. And then he obviously got a BBC commission for future series. So different people can do well from it. I'll just share you one of the things. So when I said earlier that one of our kind of key aims is all about driving awareness and really kind of growing shows. Just find the right thing. And really growing shows. So we spend a lot of time and money on the PR end of it, and we have a PR agency that works with us. And so we want to make the awards seem cool and a great thing to enter, but also our heroes are our entrants, and our job is to sort of hold them up. But we were like on the one show talking about the awards before the ceremony. Afterwards, loads of people use our lists to write about stuff, and they might, concentrate on some of the big celebs because there's a nice photo they can put in their paper, but then they're talking about other shows that were successful. So yeah, we get loads of press for the awards. Great opportunity to grow awareness, and then to use that to kind of drive your own success from the awards.
Brilliant. Oh, some nice reminders of the awards last year. Great. Matt, that's everything. That's everyone's questions. We missed a few out, but we've just not got the time for them.
Send me an email or a tweet, and I'm happy to reply.
I forget your Twitter handle, Matt. It's really difficult to remember. What is it again?
On Twitter, I'm personally at Matt with an ATT, or you can go to the BritPod Awards.
Well, I'm always so jealous of your Twitter handle that you got there first and got that.
Don't be jealous of all the misdirected tweets I get all the time from people referencing their friend called Matt. So
Oh yeah,
it's a lovely thing, and I'm very excited to have it. But I sort of think I'm so lucky to have it that I have to endure some pain, which is all the misdirected.
You like a podcast version of John Lewis, aren't you?
Yes, I do very much understand his how he feels about Twitter.
So March the 1st is when the British Podcast Awards open, and for more information you can go to britishpodcastawards.co.uk.
britishpodcastawards.com.
Oh, I knew I'd get it wrong. We're breaking now, everybody. So we're going to come. Let's have a nice 5 minutes. No, let's have 10 minutes. Let's do 7:10. Be generous. You can have a proper wee in that time. And when you come back, we'll be speaking to 3 award winners from the Mike's Podcast Club community to tell you their winning hacks and if winning an award has actually worked. If you've got a shoot now, don't forget you can donate to Mike's Podcast Club and help us with the running by buying us a coffee, and we'll put the link to that in the chat. So everyone, that big thanks to Matt. Thank you very much for joining us, Matt, and we will see you at 19:10 hours. Thank you. So welcome back to part 2 of February's Mike's Podcast Club. I really want to say March, but it is February, isn't it? And in this part, we've got some members of our community who have won podcast awards, not all necessarily British Podcast Awards, and they're going to be telling you some of their hacks to create award-winning entries, and also, you know, some truths about podcast awards. So we've got Charles Commons. You might know him. He's presents a podcast called It's All Cobblers to Me, and they won Club Podcast of the Year at the Football Supporters Association Awards 2021. That's a mouthful, isn't it? We've got Ian. He's the presenter of Cold War Conversations. Now, he's not just won one award, he's won 2 awards. He's won Best Arts and History Podcast at Quite the Podcast Awards 2021, and he was the runner-up for Best History Podcast at the Discover Pod Awards 2021. And we have got Steve, who is lovingly standing in for Frankie, who couldn't make it tonight, and he co-presents with Frankie, Doing It for the Kids podcast, the Best Business Podcast at the British Podcast Awards 2021, and also bronze winner at the 2020 awards. Am I right, Steve?
Yeah, they snuck us back in for another year. Because my son went, well, bronze isn't really winning, is it? And so, little sod.
Hey, well, you can blame it on your son, but no, dedicate the award to your son. Charles and Ian, I'm happy if you come off mute. I don't mind.
Hello.
Hi. So I wanted, because you've all approached awards differently. You've all won different types of awards. I wanted to go through each of you individually about the process of the awards that you went for, and then I'm going to ask you some tips. So let's start. Who shall we start with? Let's start with Steve, actually, because we have just been talking about the British Podcast Awards, and their process, as Matt has explained, is the entry form process. So why do you think yours was a winning entry? That's a big question to start with.
God, I'd love to know. I thought so. Frankie and I co-present it, we co-edit it, and we also co-made the entry. So I took over doing the audio bit, and she took over doing the written side of it, because she's a really good writer and knows what she's doing. But that said, we would share what we were working on with each other. And I think that was quite helpful. We didn't play it to our mums, but having that other pair of ears to go, I'm not sure about that, or that didn't make sense. And actually, I remember we definitely tried to avoid the in-jokes that we have, because we aim at a community and there's recurring things happen, So what happened? We with our entry, and even though Matt said this didn't matter, I know what we tried to do, and that was to try and give you a sense that you were listening to an episode during the entry. So we started with the opener, but it was an opener that was very different. So we don't just start with a bit of music and then hi, this is this and this is what. So it's always a bit odd, our opening anyway. So we tried to grab their attention straight away, and we went through the flow of an episode. So how it would start into our question bit, because it's a Q&A sort of agony aunt sort of podcast, and then some examples of our questions and answers, and then how it ends when we're asking for listener feedback and questions. So even though it was only 15 minutes, it kind of felt like you were listening to the whole episode. So I thought that worked well. But Frankie is amazing at putting into words what doing it for the kids is. And I think we did that with the track listing, you know, like Matt said, not just saying this happened at this point, but like exemplifying why, what that kind of shows, because it's just an opportunity again to kind of like drum it home to people who haven't listened to the podcast before. And we also spent quite a lot of time on that added PDF. So even though Matt was saying it's just a bit, I kind of feel like if it was like, you know, this podcast or this podcast to go into the shortlist or to win, that extra bit of information could make the difference. And she's a graphic designer, so she designed this beautiful thing which really looks professional, even though it's just us two idiots making the podcast. But it was full of evidence. Like, it started with a quote from a listener and an email that she'd been sent just the week before. And then we had like quotes from our community, from then obviously from Twitter and reviews and things like that. And we really tried to get across use the opportunity to try and explain why we thought we deserved to win, like what was great about our podcast rather than just the audio. Yeah, it's something that if you've got the space to add an additional file or to upload something, and don't make it out of context. So if there's an option to add additional information, don't just upload a photo, like put it into a PDF and put a little explainer on it, or use that space to put a quote on there or something like that. Because if you've got that space, exploit it, I think. Yeah, she made the most of it. It was like a 9-page PDF of, admittedly, she's a designer, so there was a lot of white space, whereas I would have crammed it in. But it looked amazing. I've got a note here saying it was a 30-page PDF. Was it? Yeah. Maybe I've got the short version. I was trying to find it. I've got it here. Yeah, I mean, now, because I do another podcast as well, I'm tempted to hire her to do my PDF for next year for being freelance as well, because I'm shocking at these things. But hers, it was great. But do you know what? Just putting together our entry made us both really proud of what we've done, particularly in last year with that COVID year. And producing it in lockdown from our cars and late at night around our kids and things. Can we hire her too? Do you know, I'm sure she's a freelance graphic designer. Go for it. So that's the thing to remember, isn't it? Like, maybe ask your buddy to help you design something. You've got enough time to think about it now, and you can put your entry together, make it special. Yeah, it was really special. And I know, like, it's just a bit of it. And obviously we put a lot of effort into the audio entry. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. But so it's Frankie Tortora, if you want. Somebody said, who is she? So Frankie Tortora, and she runs the Doing It for the Kids community. And we did a Doing It for the Kids podcast off the back of that. And anyway, but like I said, but she's also really good, I think, at getting across the text. But as well, Steve, you can't not. You've got to think that your content is there in the first place, and your community is there in the first place, and you've got good things to show off in a nice way. Yeah, I think it was important for us to get across. So if you don't know, so Doing It for the Kids community is for freelancing parents, and so they. So the idea of the podcast is that they ask us a question about freelancing, running a business with kids in the mix, and then we try and answer it. And in amongst that, have a laugh as well. And it's always 20 minutes long. So we're like, every episode is really tightly edited. And I can't remember what. Oh yeah. So, but yeah, we were really trying to get across in our written entry, but also in the clips, to show how much it is a community-led podcast. The fact that we start each episode with comments from the episode before, so it kind of like feeds into each other the whole time, and the fact that every episode is based around a question from the community. And then in the evidence that Frankie could give, we could show the real difference that actually makes to people, particularly in that lockdown year, which was so intense for people, well, for everyone, but for people trying to keep their businesses afloat and keep their families afloat. I think it helped. I mean, obviously we were there for 2 years in the shortlist, but I think last year in particular, maybe the year itself played into our hands, because we really did make a difference to our audience.
Thanks, Steve. Just a note on the chat. If you want to ask Steve a question, or any of our community award winners a question, then pop your question in chat, but pop that hashtag question before your question, so we know it's a question. I want to go to Ian next, who's won a different approach to winning an award. It was a different type of award. So Ian was a runner-up in the Discover Pod Awards and won the Best History Podcast at Quite the Podcast Awards. Now, these two awards are different because you're not... Oh, the initial bit is different, is in that it's not a judging panel, it is purely public vote. So why... my initial question is why do you go for those sorts of awards as opposed to going for a British Podcast Award?
Well, it was interesting listening to Matt, because it's given me a different view of the British Podcast Awards, because it's, British Podcast Awards is much more around what your content is like and the originality in your content, regardless of the number of listeners. Whereas the two that, I won one and was runner-up in the other, was purely public votes. And there's probably more of those around because they're relatively low maintenance for people to set up, because you've not got a judging panel there. So they're worth hunting down. I mean, the one that I won was a relatively small podcast network had set that up. And in fact, they've decided to stop doing it now. So I'm the undisputed and only winner of the award there. But I think with ones where it's a public vote, you've got to mobilize your listenership. So if you've got an engaged listenership, you're in with a shout. So
how did you do that?
There are a number of ways. I think it helps if you can put humor into it. My subject matter being Cold War and interviews with people who experienced the Cold War is generally serious subject matter, but if you can put humor into it, I think that helps. So what I did is I found loads of Soviet posters of people voting and converted them using Canva in a very primitive way to say, vote for Cold War conversations, comrades, and various other things like that, and use social media to promote that, and schedule posts to come out on regular basis, really to just get some noise out and get people to look at it and laugh at it and hopefully vote. The other thing I did is my hosting provider allows me to place dynamic ads at the start and end of every episode or selected episodes. So I recorded a pre-roll promotion saying you could really help me by voting for this. And so I think the voting period was about a month. So, I had that on all my ads, on all my episodes, which really helped. But it's really around trying to mobilize whatever audience you've got to actually get out there and vote. I think that the difficulty I found was that I had no idea how I was doing or how many votes were cast. So I've really got no idea how much listener engagement there was there, but obviously it was enough to win one and be, runner up for another. I mean, the one that I was runner up for is a big US one that claims to be the biggest listener vote podcast awards around, but I'm not sure whether that claim can be substantiated in any way. But that was, I think, how I did it anyway.
There's a bit difficulty at first with that, though, isn't there, Ian? With the Discover Pod Awards, there's 2 stages. So You have to tell me about the stages.
Yeah, you have to be nominated first. So you have to get your vote out to be nominated. And then you're in then you can proudly say you're a finalist. And then you're up against about 10 other podcasts who are then voted for. So it's a bit confusing for your listenership because they think, well, hang on, I thought I'd already voted for this. So it's getting that concept over, and I've no idea what the thresholds are there, and obviously that's going to vary from year to year. But Discover Pods fitted me well because it had a direct history category, and that's one thing I noticed with British Podcast Awards, and I think other people have commented on it, is some of the categories aren't necessarily exact fit. I guess the nearest fit for me would be documentary for British Podcast Awards, but I guess I wouldn't think that I'm particularly innovative in terms of the documentary side of things. But you know, I just need to put together a 30-page PDF, obviously.
Or smartest, Matt's put in the chat. Smartest podcast. I'm glad. I definitely think you should go in for it. We'll come back to you in a second, Ian.
Yeah, sure.
I want to move to Charles now because Charles's approach to awards. It reminded me of when Matt played the little clip of the little compilation of the British Podcast Awards last year. We saw Frankie, who said her thoughts were during her speech. She said, "Awards are bullshit until you win one." And that was certainly Charles. You explain your own words, Charles. Your approach to podcast awards.
It's the point where I wish Matt had left after he'd finished. No, I just very cynical, essentially, where I would basically look at it and go, if you're not big enough, if you're not the BBC or a big media outlet or a huge podcast like Matt mentioned, My Dad Wrote a Porno and big massive podcasts like that, then you don't really have a chance. Now, in fairness, there are obviously other ways, and Matt explained it quite well, didn't he, in terms of like sharing your success and showing your journey to your podcast success and stuff like that. But yeah, mine was very much kind of like, what's the point? And actually 2 years ago, the lockdown, the one where you were nominated, Vic, I didn't enter the British Podcast Awards because I was just very much like, well, there's no point in me entering because I won't win. So therefore I'm not going to bother. And then on the actual night when we were all watching on Zoom, and there was both yourself and then there was Steve and Frankie in Frankie's shared garden on the picnic table having a picnic, I was very jealous. And I literally just sort of felt a bit silly for having not even I'm not saying that I would have won had I entered, but the fact that I wasn't in it to win it made me sort of go, oh, what a twit.
Well, you took yourself down a different route though. You now, so we've got BPA big awards, we've got public vote awards with Ian, and you went down a niche route. So tell us about your podcast and then that niche route that you went down, which is another angle to podcast awards.
Yeah, so because my podcast is a fans podcast, a football fans podcast for fans of Northampton Town Football Club. So we obviously think very much about just that, and that's what we really focus on. So if you don't support Northampton, then it's not going to be for you every single week. But yeah, the awards that we entered, Football Supporters Association Awards, so that is if you've got a supporters trust at a football club, then it's the overall sort of governing body, if you like, I think, of that. And they have an awards which goes across the board. So there were awards for the player of the year. So like Mo Salah won that, who plays for Liverpool. So there were awards all across the board. And then there was some podcast awards in there. So there was a podcast of the year, which I think went to the Guardian's Football Weekly, which is hosted by Max Rushton. And then there was the Club Podcast of the Year, which is hosted by me. And they basically put this out and said, much like what Ian did, it's a public vote to start off with. But then once we'd been nominated, I was expecting another public vote. So I'd got everything ready, like scheduled posts and all this that Ian was talking about, to go to get people to re-vote again. But when it was announced, I actually didn't read the thing. I was too excited to have been nominated in the first place, so I didn't read it properly. and I noticed that actually our award, the Club Podcast Award, and I think the equivalent one for like a blogger. So there was a Club Blog of the Year, I think, as well, or they named it something slightly different. They were to be judged by a panel. And I think that was because they realised that essentially football clubs of different statures have different numbers of people that could vote for them. And so therefore it was fairer. They never said that. They never admitted that that's why they did it. They just stated that it would be judged. And then I did the silly thing of going away and listening to the other podcasts and thinking, oh, we're not going to win that. And then we did. So, but yeah, going down that niche route and going down into that part of actually going, because even it, like the British Podcast Awards has a best sport category. Well, like in previous years, I think the cycling podcast has won that maybe. You know, all of these different sports are there, whereas this was just football. So I've immediately taken away and out of the equation all of these hundreds of different podcasts that talk about other subjects within sport. So straight away it's narrowed the field down a little bit, which is good, I think.
I think on that as well is potentially looking beyond, like you've gone to a niche of a football awards, but also looking at things that's got a podcast category, but also maybe looking at awards that haven't got a specific podcast category. So it might be a grassroots award or like a sound award that Radio Linter put up, or a marketing award. And there's lots of different loads of awards basically. But maybe I'll go to Steve a second. Have you nominated yourself for any other awards?
No. we went the 2020 awards was that was the first year we were around to enter an award. And made the shortlist and got bronze, and then obviously British Podcast Awards again last year. So no, we haven't entered any other podcasting or business awards. No. And I, like Charles, I've been doing the Being Freelance podcast for it's in its 8th year this year. And I've always been like, wow, it's not really worth me entering it because I don't think it really stands out enough. And so I feel a bit stupid that I've kind of decided myself that it's not worth entering. So I think that's good advice from Charles. But that said, for me, doing it for the kids did stand out. So I always felt like we had a better chance because it was different. So yeah, I honestly, the British Podcast Awards was the only one I was really aware of. So that's why we went for that.
Have you got a winning? This is a really loaded question. But have you got a winner strategy? So, what are your impressive bits? What do you think are your impressive bits that you?
A winning strategy. I mean, Frankie. Do you know? Because I know Frankie couldn't come, but what was her advice? Because she, I was messaging her earlier because she was sorry she couldn't be here. She said, "Make a fucking great podcast, and you shouldn't go too far wrong."
There you go. That's the number one tip.
Yeah, and she's kind of onto something. But then, like Matt said, it's about the entry as well, isn't it? So you've got to get across why you think your podcast is fucking great or sounds great. And so, yeah, like I mentioned about making it feel like you were listening. The entry for us made it feel like you were part of listening to the podcast, and the humor, but also the smart elements, the production quality that we're kind of proud of with it as well. So we had loads to choose from, and then I created an insane multi-track, and I've started using Hindenburg Journalist now, which is brilliant because you can take clips and just easily dump them in a bin, basically. So you've got your good clips, but you've got to really pay attention to the rules because I forget what Matt said now, but is it 3? You can only use 3 episodes, for example, or whatever it might be. So 5 clips, but only from 3 episodes or something like that. And so each track was like a different episode. And then I would play around with not just what would work, but what made the best use of the time. So maybe one clip was really great, but it was like 4 minutes. Could I find another clip that did a similar job, but it was only 3 minutes, meaning we could have something else be a bit longer. So by having that multi-track and just switching things on and off and playing around with it and then sending it over to Frankie, what do you think to this? That worked really well as a strategy, I think, because it means you can easily turn things on and off and come back to it. But you've really got to label things well. And you could even, like the second year that we did it, we were kind of making a note of, that was a good, like that could be a good one for an award entry, because something about it just elevated it more than like all the other great episodes. Of course, they're all great, but maybe there's something in it which really elevated it, particularly for us in that COVID year. Maybe it was a great listener email, or we made a really good point, or we made ourselves really laugh, and then it just had a real sort of punch to it in the audio. So I don't know whether we have a strategy as such.
I think that makes a strategy, what you just explained there. Definitely.
Yeah.
There's something around there. Go on, sorry, Steve.
No, I was going to say, but as well as, I think if you feel like you have great bits about your podcast or about it that make it different, you can't assume that the judges are necessarily going to pick up on them. So use the text and the additional material, in the case of the British Podcast Awards, to underline what that is. So that then as they're listening to it, they'll go, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like, so I don't think, I unless you like your entry is really great, then presumably it's never going to make it to a second listen and so on with a judging panel. I don't know. I've not been a judge, but I try and imagine if I was, then they're going to start reading things and go, oh, okay. And that's when these bits can really elevate you. And if you don't tell them, you can't just presume that they know, because they don't listen to your podcast and they've got loads to choose from.
Some great tips there. And it's that old saying as well, is to consider your listener, which will be a bunch of judges. But for some of us who are going and getting awards, we haven't got any judges to listen to what we're doing. So Ian,
we have, our judges are our listeners.
There you go. Look at that. Beautiful. What a beautiful segue. So when I talked to you a couple of days ago, you said something along the lines of, but I'm lucky because I've got a strong listenership, or I'm all right because I've got a strong community of listeners. And then I said, well, you're not lucky, it's because you are consistent. So if we take a few steps back, is that you've got a good quality product to put forward to a public vote, haven't you?
I have, but it's the people that listen to it day in, day out are the ones who are going to be most likely to vote. Yeah. So it is around creating an engaged listenership who will actually click on a obscure link on another site and perhaps have to enter an email address or something. I mean, there's often a number of hurdles for people to vote. It's not as easy as sending a tweet. But yeah, for the public vote, I mean, you need to have an engaged listenership. But I think it's also, it's a bit of what Charles has done, is finding these niche podcasts or even niche companies that are doing podcast awards. So we need to just be better at hunting down these other awards, because an award is an award. And once you've won an award, even if, you won with 5 votes and the other podcast got two votes, you are an award-winning podcast, as you will see all over my social media banners. And as Vic kindly reminded me, I hadn't even bothered putting it on my website, which has now been fixed.
A bit more polite than that. And then similar question to you, Charles. What do you think the judges saw, and what are the notes that they hit with your podcast? Why did they pick? Yeah.
I think it's like what Steve said. It's a fucking great podcast, and therefore it's award-winning, or at least that's how I feel about it now, because I've got proof in a nice big chunky column that we have as an award. It was odd for me because we didn't have, so we had the public vote to get the nomination, but then we were just told there'd be a panel. So I didn't know at that point what to do to make myself stand out. So I think I literally said to myself, let's just make every single episode from here on, from the point we got nominated up until the point when the actual awards were taking place, let's make every single one of those episodes as good as it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I kind of found out afterwards was part of the reason why we won was because of the stuff that we do around the actual audio podcast. So the community that we've built up, we've got quite a strong, I think we've got 40 people who support us on Patreon now. Every single one of them are in a Slack channel community forum thing. And we spend I spend pretty much most of every match day literally on my phone with those people. And on top of that, we then sponsor one of the players in the women's team as well. That obviously the money that we raise from the Patreon is what pays for that. But we really champion the women's team. They've credited this week, actually, they've been talking in one of the managers was interviewed in, I think it was a magazine or a newspaper, but they credited us with the fact that they'd got exposure over the last couple of years, which is really nice to have somebody turn around and say it's thanks to you as much as anybody else. And I think that went some distance for it as well, because they were sort of seeing that we were giving back to the community that we're trying to serve. It's not just a case of I make this podcast and, you know, give me stuff like a pedestal and whatnot within the community that we're in. We're actually doing other stuff to help out that and to champion the smaller parts of what goes on around Northampton.
Yeah, so you've got more strings to your bow than purely you've got more to talk about than purely content. I suppose one of my last questions is then, does it matter? Like, our awards, all that, like, has it made any impact? Or what is that recognition being good for? I'll come to Ian with that one, actually.
I guess it builds your confidence. I mean, particularly with a public vote, well, not particularly with a public vote, but with a public vote, you know, I know it's actual listeners that are, you know, that are supporting and are voting for me there. Whereas with a panel-led vote, yes, you should win on the basis of quality, but they're not the people who are listening day in or week in, week out. Guy, if I was doing it daily, I would go bonkers. But I think it helps with your confidence. It potentially opens doors. I haven't had a flood of sponsors yet knocking on my door, but I always live in hope. But I think, you know, if you don't go in for awards or you don't win awards, I think there's other ways of magnifying your podcast, and that it shouldn't just be about awards. And I was thinking about this while I was speaking to you just then, in terms of, you know, I've put award-winning podcast up on my social, but if you've got a great quote, then put that in your banner. People, you know, just use the collateral that you've got to magnify your podcast to somebody who maybe just stumbles across it and thinks, is this worth a listen? And if there's a quote there saying it's bloody brilliant, well, that might just push them over the line. So yeah, I've won an award, but there's other ways of building your audience or building your listenership.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. What other things can you take from your repertoire of feedback or kudos or things that people told you you're good at, or they've listened or done well at, how else can you like tell people about that and build your reputation through that? Steve, so are you feeling the impact of your award winningness?
So, well, I'm very conscious that we could have made more, and in fact we can still make more of it, but we're just knackered, like, you know, getting through life, really, as in, like, I obviously it was great for us and confidence wise, but I think it was great for our listeners as well, because everybody likes to feel like they're listening, you know, oh great, other people thought it was good too, and who knows, that might help them share it and get more people to listen. We do try and get sponsorship for both our podcasts, and I can't help but think that having the fact that we won a British Podcast Award must give them confidence. Yes. Along with like how many, I'm always conscious in fact that I might be trying to get somebody to sponsor being freelance, and I'm like, here's all the listeners and here's where they are. Oh, and I also do this other podcast which won an award, and it's like, oh okay, well we want to sponsor the one that I'm kind of almost yeah, so that helps. But I think actually weirdly it's probably, without me realizing, helped me. So I am a freelance podcast and video creator, so it's helped me because people go, oh well, he's capable of editing or creating this thing, and people want to sort of work with people who must be good at doing those so it helped me up my rates and get found and get people wanting to work with me. I think I've definitely had lots more people over the past couple of years wanting me to edit their podcasts.
Amazing. So just on, not even on a podcast level, but on a professional individual level, reputationally, it's done you good. Yeah,
and you know, and there's the thing, you don't necessarily have to win it. Like to be shortlisted, is awesome in itself.
I'm still dining out on mine. It's been 2 years. I only got nominated. I'm literally dining out every day. So
and like I think I said earlier, like genuinely just putting together the entry will make you feel like just good about what you've achieved, because it's, you know, it can be easy just to go from one episode to the next episode to the next episode. To actually sit there and reflect on what you've done is a cool thing to do in general, I think.
Absolutely. Kate's asked a question in chat, how long do you think you how long can you milk it for, saying award winning? I think permanently.
Absolutely. There's no sell-by date on it at all.
No.
I mean, God, how many people, how many actors?
Just to butt in, we get a Google alert anytime anyone mentions British Podcast Awards. People from the first year still say they're award winning. So absolutely.
Oh my
fine.
God. That's a big Google alert.
And like Oscar winners, they always have it, don't they? On the Academy Award winner or Academy Award nominated on the posters for people who maybe got one in the 70s. So
absolutely, in the 1870s even.
Charles, have you tell me about your impacts for winning the award? And while you do that, I'm going to let the cat in, so don't mind.
Okay. Go let Alan in. Go on. For me, mostly, it was it's how other podcasters in my niche react to us. So because I do 2 shows a week, one of which is a preview of the upcoming game, and we get a fan from the opposition to come on and chat with us. So going out and finding that fan is the hardest bit of that podcast, is finding guests. Steve will know and Ian will know. And the best bit of it is when you get a podcast from another team who then turns around and is like, oh, you're that podcast that won the Club Podcast of the Year. That's brilliant. Yes, I'll come on it. That'll be great. And a couple of weeks ago, we played Sutton United, and their podcast, I think, has been going for about a year. And they came on our show, and I went on theirs as well. And when I went on their one, which was like they do it live on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, I think. So it's like this, where there's a video. And he literally introduced me as if I was some ridiculously famous, brilliant director or actor or something. And I sat there like this going, that's really nice, but I now feel really weird and embarrassed. But it was really nice. You know, it was one of those that I just kind of went, that's nice. And I think the recognition from my peers, essentially, so the people that do the podcast for football clubs up and down the country, when they turn around and go, not that anybody's necessarily said this to me, but when they sort of look at our podcast and go, that's like a flagship, or that's the one to beat kind of thing. It's a bit like if you're top of the league, everybody wants to beat you. So
that
that's
can't
how
happen often for Northampton Town, though, surely.
I was wondering when the dig was going to come in.
Yeah.
No, I was surprised that none of their players won Player of the Year. That was the big shocker for me.
I wasn't. But yeah, that kind of thing is really good. And then it's the things like, so I did go all out as soon as we won it. I sent stuff to obviously the local media in Northampton all got a press release sent to them. I think I even sent the press release to like big places as well. Like I definitely sent it to the Guardian, but I because they'd won the Podcast of the Year award, I basically sent them a press release that was like a paragraph just for them to include in the article that they were going to write clearly for, look at us, we won this. And I just thought, well, if you put us in there as well, that'd be amazing. And they did. They didn't put the whole paragraph in, but they mentioned us. And I just sort of went, oh, I wonder if I'd not sent that, would they have done it? But yeah, so I dined out on it straight away. And that recognition that I've got, and then the recognition that I've got from people. So when I go to the football, so I suppose I'm a bit unusual in a way for podcasting, because obviously I get to go and see my audience by going to a football match. I quite often will have people turn around to me and say things like, oh, I love the podcast, or whatever they might say. They don't all say that. Some of them say horrible things. But so, you know, when they turn around and you get that feedback, it was really nice after we won it for people to be turning around and saying, well done. And they felt like it was for them as much as it was for me, which was really cool.
Oh, so all in all, worth giving it a bash. Milking your, I'm going to say this, it's coming, milking your assets, shouting about them, and putting, basically shouting about what you're good at. I know it's really weird for us as British people to do that. It makes feels a little bit icky, but in your entry film, shouting about what you're doing, mobilising your community. Now, just a quick question, like how long, Ian, did it take you to enter the Public Choice Awards? Like, what did you do?
How long had I been podcasting before I entered it?
No, how long was the entry process? Like you said.
Oh, okay. I think it was probably maybe a month for nominations and then another month for the public vote. It was quite a tight timeline. And so the previous year, I'd missed an email from them, or they hadn't emailed me. And I only sort of tried to mobilize my listeners in the last week. So was already flogging a dead horse. Whereas I kept my eye on the dates and made sure, right, as soon as I knew that I was then in the final, get everybody out as quickly as possible, which sort of helped, because it sort of, I think, probably stopped voter fatigue as well if it's over a short time frame. And I think most of them probably operate in that way.
Steve, how long were you working on that application for you and Frankie with that delicious PDF?
I don't know. I do know that I think I would recommend giving yourself as much time as possible, especially because you're likely busy doing whatever else it is you do and producing new content and what have you. So start listening back to episodes and saving clips if you've not been doing it as you go along, and yeah, and then like when you've maybe mixed out one or two versions of your entry, then to leave it for a bit, so you've got enough time to come back and listen to it again and think, oh, actually no, I could move that. So it's kind of that thing of taking your time, but don't take forever as well, because there's you can just faff around a lot. So I think to start early so that you can then leave it, come back, listen to it again, and then obviously upload it at 5 minutes too. For deadline by the sense of it, along with everybody else. But it's interesting what Matt said specifically for British Podcast Awards, wasn't it? That you can go back and change things. Like it's not properly in until it's in, and until the deadline is passed. So you can always go back and swap stuff over.
And Charles, yours was as easy as throwing a link up there, wasn't it? They wanted no extra information, no nada.
Yeah, it was literally they put. So I, like Ian, the previous year, with that, I had not really like mobilized the fans enough. Basically, didn't get my listeners really into it. Didn't tell them enough about it as often as I could have done. So this time around, I kept an eye on the date, and then as soon as I saw that they put the tweet out, then literally. They put a tweet out, which was a link to the website where you then filled in the form to nominate each category. And I literally just flogged that and just created my own social media around it. And I think I probably spent about half a day scheduling in like TweetDeck or wherever, just hundreds of tweets that basically said, go and vote for us. Here's the link. I think I even did a video of me filling in the thing to nominate myself and put that up and just went, that's how easy it is. Now you do it.
Yeah. But Vic, I was going to say, I mean, mobilizing your audience is really good, but I think what made the real difference to my vote was the extra votes I picked up from the Mike Podcast Club's community. That's what pushed it over the line.
Well, thank you. I thought it might have. That is it for tonight's Mike's Podcast Club. Thank you to Charles, Ian. I didn't pay him to say that. We didn't pay him to say that. Of course, Matt Deegan and Steve Folland for sharing their insightful advice into how to win a podcast award. Let me get my list up because I've got a shopping list to run through with you at the end of this. What are we? Okay, so we will be sending out our Facebook group invites to the people that come to a couple of meetups. If you've learned anything tonight, or you just like the cut of our jib, consider buying us a coffee. You can donate to the running of Mike's Podcast Club from as low as £4, and we'll pop the link to that in the chat. We are going to put this video online in a couple of weeks' time. The next event is how to get your podcast found. And it's some podcast marketing tips with Ariel Nissenblatt. And that's on March the 9th, and that's online. And on the 25th of February, we're having an in-person social in Manchester. So that's no talks, no workshops, just a couple of beers or cokes, and just having a nice time. So you can follow us on Twitter. That's at Mike'sPodcastClub.com. That's it for February's Mike's Podcast Club. Thank you very much for spending a couple of hours with us tonight. And again, big thank you to our guests. We'll see you next time.